There is one key principle, like nutrition is highly personalized, right? Different bodies, respond to different foods in different ways. There is definitely one key principle, though, that applies to everybody in terms of fat loss. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Soda Personal Training Podcast. Phil, good to be here with you again.
Sean, it's always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Today, we're going to be talking about fat loss diets, the king of fat loss diets. What are we doing?
Well, we're going to talk through it. Is there one diet that's best? Or is there not?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because, we made a little outline here, right? You got these bullet points we're going to go over. And there is actually one of these strategies that I'm going to say is the best, right? We're going to go over 4 or 5 different things. All roads lead to one thing, which I'll come back to at the end. Ooh. But anyway.
Yeah, we haven't talked about which one that is.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're not, yeah.
Hopefully we agree. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. We're probably not going to agree. Probably. This is actually, it's going to be a tough one for you in general because I can see why you made this list, because your main job here is to keep me on task. That way I don't go and rant for 15 minutes about something. So
Sean, you and I both know that's impossible.
I know. But why don't you go ahead and kick things off with the best fat loss diet strategies, popular diets? Go ahead.
Yes. So I think anytime we're talking about diets, we have to look at the research, right? So we have to talk about, fat loss is the specific trend here. So we're talking about fat loss. So we're talking about a calorie deficit. So that is ahead of everything else that has to be there. That physiology is undeniable. This has been studied over and over again. But the strategies of how we can stay in that deficit, I think that's what we're going to be debating the most, is, what maybe yields the best results. But also, let's talk about sustainability, because there's short-term and there's long-term. And there are very different approaches to those, I think. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. And just for, the total beginner who's never heard these terms before, a calorie deficit just means that you are eating less calories than you are burning. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the body is losing weight, which we'll get into, losing body fat versus losing muscle. But that's all a calorie deficit is, okay? You are eating less than you're burning. You're burning more than you're eating, okay?
Yes.
So what are the different... let's go into a few of them, right? What are the ones we're going to talk about?
The biggest ones that tend to be talked about are the ketogenic diet, which is a very high fat diet works by putting your body into ketosis, and that these fat burning ketones help stimulate more fat burning than other diets. That's the argument, so to speak.
That was a great scientific explanation.
Sean's already giving me a side eye.
These fat burning ketones help you burn more fat or something like that.
Yeah, that's what they say. And then there's intermittent fasting, which is a restricted eating window that people often use to lose weight as well, which does work, but perhaps not for the reason a lot of people think.
I'm holding back my comments as you intro all these.
Yep. I'll cover these last 2, and then you can jump right in. There's calorie counting and tracking, so that if it fits your macro approach. And then there is the Mediterranean diet, I think is just worth talking about because of the research. It's the only diet that actually seems to have a little bit of a pull based on research. But I think as you'll continue to listen, it is not that simple. All right, Sean's about to explode.
The people who are just listening and can't see me on video, I'm about to just fall out of my seat on that one. The Mediterranean diet is the only one that has any backing or whatever. All right, here we go.
Let's jump in. Let's go.
Should we just talk about the keto diet first?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's jump into keto.
Let me preface it by saying that I've experimented on myself with a lot of different diets. It started off as kind of a quest to end my gastrointestinal digestive issues that I always had throughout my teens and 20s. And then in my early 30s, it became, okay, how can I build lots of freaking muscle? Okay. The ketogenic diet. Okay. A ketogenic diet, there's some value to it. There's some value to all of these, by the way.
Of course.
A ketogenic diet is basically, it's a low carb diet. Okay. Now, they're going to tell you when you Google it and you're like, how do I do a keto diet? It's going to say you got to not eat more than 50 grams of carbs per day. And then, of course, you're like, well, wait a minute. Is that the same for, a 90-pound woman versus a 250-pound man? Probably not, but let's go with it. Okay. So you're not eating more than 50 grams of carbs per day. This is how you get into this state of ketosis, where, as Phil so scientifically explained to us, the body is then generating these ketones which somehow burn fat. Okay, it's magic, right? Now, In terms of using keto as a fat loss diet, a couple things I'll say. A ketogenic diet can be very good because number one, it kind of promotes discipline. You have to avoid all the junky carbs. Like most of us can go to Starbucks and get more than 50 grams of carbs in your latte. Right
Easily.
away. So like it's really hard to eat less than 50 grams of carbs per day. Okay, so that's one thing. It also, I would argue, kind of promotes eating more whole natural foods because when you go to the grocery store, you're in like the middle aisles where all of the junk and all of the bad things are. That's like a lot of it's just all carbs, right?
Yep.
So it kind of promotes you having to eat things more like, more, well, vegetables, meats, dairy, things like that, which I would argue, getting into a rabbit hole now, which I would argue are in general healthy foods. Okay, so that's the keto diet.
Yep.
And in terms of a fat loss strategy, I'm not going to say that it's the best thing you could do, but it is a decent idea because for most people, it's very hard to overeat definitely on high protein foods,
Yep.
but particularly those whole foods. Like it's really easy for you to overeat if you go to the grocery store and you buy all the Pringles and the animal crackers and the wheat thins and all the stuff that's filled up with the junky carbs in the middle. Not that easy to overeat on meat, dairy, vegetables, the things
Right.
that would fit into a keto diet.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I already ranted.
No,
and rambled.
that's great. I think that was a really good summation of things. And yes, the keto diet is certainly effective for those reasons. It's high protein, more than anything else, in my opinion. Like every diet, the reason why keto works is not because you're eating more of something that's better. It's because you're eating less garbage. Like no diet includes. Animal crackers seems to be a very common theme when we talk about nutrition, but it just doesn't include the stuff that makes you feel horrible, that might be pro-inflammatory, which we can certainly get into another time, but it cuts out the stuff that leads to excessive calories and thus weight gain over time. As you said, protein, it keeps you very satiated. That's why it works so well in any diet, and almost all diets are going to emphasize high protein if it's geared towards fat loss because it keeps you very satiated. It has a high thermic effect, meaning your body has to do a lot of work to process it, digest it, and assimilate it into its base units, being amino acids, to help rebuild muscle tissue.
Getting real sciencey now.
Oh
I
yeah,
like it.
you like that? So that is why keto can work. It's low carb, so that is one approach. It was very trendy, and I don't like any sort of trend because just like they thought foam rolling was gonna cure cancer, and coconut oil you should put in everything and rub it on your face and your skin and your teeth. Now that's gone. So like there's merit in that fact that sometimes when things come and go, that is a red flag, and keto is still around.
Yeah.
I think for those reasons. It's also a very popular food for people who have autoimmune issues, and some of the thoughts are that the plants, they have a defense mechanism against us eating them that somehow causes an autoimmune issue. That needs to be well more studied. That is mostly speculation, but it's interesting.
Way into rabbit holes now. Okay, so I like that.
But that's a good, I think, summation of keto. I almost never start people on it. We would definitely work on reducing some carb intake if people are having it, mostly for the reasons we talked about, that commonly they're just very processed. Like high carbs, if you're having fruits and veggies as your carbs and no refined sugar or processed foods, you probably won't overeat those either.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And yeah, I want to add like one thing because I pretty much agree with what you just said is that I'm not going to like start people on it or recommend people on it. My experience with keto is in the brief times that I've tried it, especially for someone like me who's active, there comes a point after about a week or two of doing it, I'm like, okay, like I feel really good. I feel really like sharp because I don't have any like junky sluggish carbs. But then after a week or two, if I'm being really active, I'm like, all right, I want some more freaking energy. Right. So then I do bring carbs back in. That's just me personally with it. Now, I will say this though, like if someone comes to me and says, I eat a diet that's a mostly keto diet, that's very low in carbs, high in fats and proteins and the stuff we just talked about, I usually don't steer them away from it. I'm usually like, yeah, that can be a pretty good strategy. Like, what do you think about that? Is that like a good approach to it? I never turn people away from it if they're already kind of doing it,
It's a great tool. I think all diets are great to try, but they have to be done with the right implementation. And then you can like document, how does this feel in my body to do this. What were the effects? Very few people have, I think, the time, resources, motivation to do that. But I think it's valuable to try out and see how your body reacts if you can commit to doing it.
Yeah.
It brings in the idea of sustainability, though, too, right? If you're only going to do something for 2 weeks, is it even worth trying unless you're just trying to educate yourself on the maybe food intolerances you have from a diet that you are leaving in exchange for keto. But I was going to give this one a sustainability score. I would say it's pretty low.
Yeah.
If you ever want to have a beer again, it's going to knock you out.
Well, I don't want to have a beer again, but I do want to have
For
other
you,
carbs
then
again. No.
You get a higher score then.
No. But actually, I agree with you on the fact that it's not sustainable. So here's what I'll say, though. Like, if somebody tells me that they're doing a keto diet, I know in my head that they're actually probably not doing a keto diet because they probably are having more carbs than they realize.
Yes.
But I'm like, you know what? That's actually okay. Because what they're telling me is they probably don't overeat carbs a ton. And I'm like, if this is working for you right now and your body feels good on it, then I think it can be a sustainable approach.
Totally.
You know, essentially like telling them to like be keto-ish without having to like totally track everything and be like, did I get over 50 grams of carbs today? Like, you don't have to worry that much about it.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of being keto-y, I think that's a decent and sustainable and good strategy.
Totally.
Maybe.
It's weird. It's what you're saying is that not every diet is right for everybody. That's really interesting.
Correct. But spoiler alert, there is one key principle. Like nutrition is highly personalized, right? And different bodies, respond to different foods in different ways and to different diets in different ways. There is definitely one key principle, though, that we're going to come back to that applies to everybody in terms of fat loss.
Yes.
So let's roll along here.
I think, as we're talking through this, there's 3 things that we can maybe score on each of these approaches. High protein. What score does keto get? I'd say that's quite high. I'd say that would be a 8, 9, 10 out of 10 because it's so protein heavy.
From a fat loss perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
Sustainability, I would say for the average American, that's going to be fairly low. I feel like, it cuts out a lot of food groups, anything processed. The flexibility of that diet is also probably fairly low, which I guess you could rope into sustainability. Like, how flexible is that diet to eat what you want when you want to? So we'll just say high protein, protein and sustainability.
Yeah, like, fat loss perspective, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. When I do keto for 2 weeks, I'll shred like 4 pounds. Maybe it's just me losing water weight because I don't have any carbs in me or whatever. But but anyway, I'll give it a high fat loss rating. Sustainability, not so much.
You bring up a very good point. Is why do all diets work? If you cut carbs out of your diet, you will immediately lose a pretty tremendous amount of weight. Keto, especially because there are so few. Carbohydrates pull water into your body based on they work physiologically in our body, which is why when people cut things out, you can have people lose 5-10 pounds in a week that they assume in a lot of cases is straight body fat. It's adipose tissue. It's water. Right. It is 100% water, and as soon as you add carbs back in, that weight will also return.
Yep.
So that is one really key principle. People are like, oh my God, it's this magic pill. Like, this is incredible. I've never seen such fast results. You could take all the carbs of any other diet, and the same thing would happen. So just keep that in mind. There's a very quick diminishing returns on that piece. Scale weight, which is why we always emphasize use a body composition test well over just scale weight, because your water fluctuations, my weight can change 5 pounds in a single day based on water intake. It's also affected by sodium. There's a lot of things there. So this kind of sets the stage for the next one, which is intermittent fasting. Works again like other diets do if we're in a calorie deficit. That's really the biggest thing there is you have an eating window. Commonly it's 8 hours on, 16 off. So the reason why I've seen this work time and time again is that you're literally cutting out 1 or 2 meals. Commonly the ones after dinner, like potato chips and ice cream and the snacky stuff when you're with your family watching your favorite show. Which leads to a 500 to 1,000 calorie deficit for a lot of people, or just less than what they were having. So if they're maintaining weight, they're now losing a pound a week or more based on the fact they just changed how they're eating. But it comes back to the idea of calorie intake.
It's still the calorie intake. Now, you can stop me here when you need to, because I'm going to rant on intermittent fasting a little bit. So,
do it.
I did intermittent fasting pretty regularly from 2017 to 2021. I loved it for my gastrointestinal issues. And so what I would do is for the most part, I would be eating in kind of like a 7 to 8 hour window, usually from like 11 a.m. or noon until 7-ish p.m., right? And then you have no calories, just water and maybe black coffee or tea outside of that, right? And so it's basically just skipping breakfast when you got this fancy term. It's intermittent fasting. It's like you're skipping breakfast, dude, So skip breakfast and only eat within that 7 to 8 hour window. Now, I loved it, just me personally, for my gastrointestinal issues, because for some reason it just felt like a clean reset every day. I don't know, just that feeling of, I've got nothing in my stomach for the last 14, 15, 16 hours. I liked it, okay? I liked it, and then oftentimes I would just do 2 big meals, right? It would be, a big meal for lunch and a big meal for dinner, maybe a snack in between, whatever. 2 large meals, mostly healthy foods, obviously, worked really well for me. Some people, it doesn't work that well for gastrointestinally. Some people's stomachs do better on 4 or 5 smaller meals per day, evenly spread throughout. This is one where you really have to play with things and see what works for you, what works for your schedule, right? Does it work for your schedule to have 3, 4, 5, maybe smaller meals? Does it work for your schedule to do intermittent fasting and have, just 2 big meals throughout the day, whatever, right? So there's the schedule thing. I will say from a fat loss, from a body composition perspective, I don't like it very much, and I almost never recommend it. Yes, there is the psychological piece, like sometimes, just eating within that window will lead people to natural calorie restriction because they don't eat as often, so they don't eat as much.
Right.
But at the same time, one of the biggest things I struggle with, number one, is getting people to eat enough protein. It's already hard enough as is, enough protein to maintain and build muscle mass, okay? That's hard enough as is within a 24-hour window, let alone a 6 to 8 hour window.
Yes.
So that's one thing. And that's actually the main reason that I went away for it for myself was about 4 years ago when I said I want to start building more muscle. I'm like, all right, well, I think I'm going to need to do kind of like the bodybuilders do this and start putting more protein into my body more frequently throughout the day, which then worked once I started eating 3, even 4 or 5 meals a day.
Yeah.
So I don't love it. I don't really like it that much from a body composition perspective, in spite of the fact that Greg O'Gallagher, Kino Body, will be promoting this with his millions of followers.
Kino Body, that dude. I know.
You don't like him that much? What do you think?
No.
I like his stuff. But
No.
I don't think it's the best way to do it.
Right.
I like him. Among the fitness influencers,
Yes.
I actually like him.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's been a while since I've seen his stuff.
Yeah.
But my thoughts on intermittent fasting are very much aligned with that. I think you got to get protein in, and anything that impedes your ability to build muscle, lean muscle, which unlocks every facet of success with body composition and metabolic health. Anything that hinders that should be reconsidered, in my opinion. So if you're not eating enough protein, it's going to make it really hard to stick with that too, especially if you're working out. Now, the one thing people will say from a health standpoint about intermittent fasting is that it talks about the autophagy of cells by restricting that window, right? So this starts to get into, again, somewhat majoring the minors for a lot of people. I think there's a lot to be said about giving your digestion a break. Perhaps we are not wired to be eating all day long. There's some thoughts on that whole Paleolithic era. Should we be eating all day long? Are we designed to digest all the time? Like, are we even naturally fasting at all? If you eat at 11 p.m. and you wake up and eat at 6, I don't think we know enough. However, if it feels good, we should do it. Some people like it, and it does make their day a little bit easier if they don't have to think about another meal. Like eating 5 meals a day is kind of, it's very annoying for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And when you eat smaller meals, oftentimes you're not getting enough protein because they're like snacky meals and things like that. So, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the autophagy thing is a whole other rabbit hole, which is actually much more complicated. Like, essentially, these people came onto the internet 8 to 10 years ago and were like, oh, well, after 16 hours of fasting, your body goes into autophagy, which means that you're going to then live forever because the body is recycling old damaged cells or something like that,
Yeah.
And it's actually a lot more complicated than that, I think, but maybe there's some value to it.
Yeah.
These people who have listened to this far in the podcast have got to be so confused. They've got to be just like, well, damn, what am I actually supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, we're going to get there, actually.
Because we're about to get to the one that actually works.
I think we should talk Mediterranean diet first.
Oh.
I think we should, so that we can, have you going to your thing.
Sidetrack and let me rant.
So the Mediterranean diet emphasizes whole foods, healthy fats, plant-based meals, fish, nuts, seeds, vegetables, olive oil. Doesn't sound too bad. That's a pretty good deal. If there's research that backs a single diet as far as the immediate health benefits that are measurable from blood work, there's a few pieces that the Mediterranean diet does suggest that's a good one. Now, Peter Attia, he's like, oh, I like the Mediterranean diet over all others. Most of the research says there is not enough data to say generally for everybody this is the one diet. But he has said if there is one that would be good to focus on for longevity, the Mediterranean diet. But guess what? It's also cutting out the processed foods, the alcohol, the processed, the refined sugar, all the same stuff that keeps you healthy. So I wouldn't get hung up on that diet at all. And I think the Mediterranean diet can be left at that. Sure, you could try it out and see how you feel, like all these other approaches. But yeah.
So where do I want to take this? I like what you just said about the Mediterranean diet, that it's mostly cutting out the junk and stuff. Here's what I don't like about the way that the Mediterranean diet is framed, okay, or the way that it's kind of sold to us. It's sold as this diet where, for example, eating red meat is something that you should only do once every 3 months on the festival of whatever. It should be and then you should eat 3 ounces of it, and that's it, and only have 12 ounces of red meat per year, right? Now, I'll keep this civil. I'm not going to get
trust you on
too
that.
off my soapbox on this. But so I'm mostly a proponent of eating pretty high quantities of red meat, eggs, the things that they say you should probably avoid on a Mediterranean diet, because those are high in saturated fats, high in dietary cholesterol, etc. Okay, so I'm going to do one little rant here. So because I get this all the time, right? I'm a fitness coach, and I people see me eating red meat fairly regularly, and they're always saying okay, well, you got to limit your red meat intake. I swear, the next time that somebody tells me that I should stop eating so much red meat because it's bad for my health.
Oh boy.
But they're sitting there eating a double chocolate mudslide dessert with a glass of wine in the other hand.
Oof. That's a horrible combination.
I am going to metaphorically smack them in the head. Violence is never the answer. I'm going to metaphorically smack them in the head so hard that they spit out the chocolate mudslide dessert and the wine. Okay? Here's my point with this whole rant, okay? The Mediterranean diet could be a very good diet. I might even go on a Mediterranean diet at some point in the future. Okay? Because I've kind of done it before, right? Now, what I have against it is the idea that it's saying red meat is bad for you. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
And I'm a proponent of red meat for most people is a good thing to put in your diet. I understand, once again, this is a really, really high-level rant here, but I understand that for some people whose bodies react differently, medical disclaimer, not a doctor, for some people whose bodies react differently to dietary cholesterol and saturated fat, it may spike your LDL cholesterol more, which may, depending on what your triglycerides and your VLDL is like, may lead to more atherosclerosis and may slightly increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. Maybe. If you eat high amounts of red meat. But you talk about majoring in the minors, okay? So this is also one of those things where I'm like, okay, if we're comparing, say, red meat from a minimally processed healthy source to, say, fish, chicken, whatever your lean or your better source of protein would be, whatever might fit into more of a Mediterranean diet, this is like level 8 versus level 9 on the healthy spectrum. When most people still need to worry about things that are like level 2 versus level 3, put away the animal crackers, the Pringles, the stuff like this, okay? Like the meat and the eggs is not the problem. It's all the other junk you eat that's the problem. Okay?
So far, we're hitting on these commonalities between all these approaches so far, which is they don't include garbage. They're not majoring in the minors like white versus brown rice, or where are we getting our nutrient-dense protein from? And again, the research says we don't really know. You would have to do lots of blood work and go with the doctor and try different things with 100% adherence to actually figure out what works best for you. That is it. If we're talking about fat loss here, because we've kind of gone off on just the quality of life and health metrics, again, Mediterranean will work if you are in a calorie deficit. That's it, and you can stick with it. So I think that leads into our last one, which this is where all the roads lead.
Correct.
if it fits your macros approach.
Dun. Yeah. And this is why Phil's saying that all the roads lead here, because these other diet strategies, which are examples of good diets, you've got, the ketogenic diet, the intermittent fasting, the Mediterranean diet. Essentially, what's happening if you do these diets right is they will lead you into an appropriate amount of calories. Maybe a slight calorie deficit, which is what you need, okay? Because to burn body fat at the end of the day, what you need, regardless of what foods you eat, you could do this on a vegan diet, you could do this on a carnivore diet, okay? You need to be in that calorie deficit and getting enough protein to maintain muscle mass. I don't care. It doesn't matter what you eat. It's about that slight calorie deficit and enough protein to maintain muscle mass. This is how you recomposition the body, okay? Yep. These diets that we just went over are good strategies and good ways to get there without you having to do any crazy tracking, okay? Like you'll essentially get there without even realizing you were doing it. You'll be in the calorie deficit without realizing it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Now, if it fits your macro approach, I believe is the most flexible. I think it is the most sustainable. And they've done research on this, and there was one. It's called the pizza study or something. And this guy, he was a fairly heavyweight gentleman, and he ate the same 2,000 calorie pizza every single day. And based on the numbers, that created this calorie deficit for him that I think he ended up losing 75 plus pounds from just eating that pizza. Now, not good quality content, of course, but it speaks to the point that he was in a calorie deficit. It was a calculated number that he was eating less than what he burned. And we'll do another podcast on all the mechanisms behind satiety and hunger and things like that. There's a huge hormonal component that you will not get if you eat a pizza every day. But if you're eating that calorie range every day, you will. You will. It's sometimes can be challenging to figure out what those numbers are. So that's why we do it here. We map it out. We put together plans that encompass those macros. But that's it. And we talked on the last one about these dartboards, right? Protein, carb, fat goal. You don't have to track calories because 100 grams of protein equals 400 calories because it's 4 calories per gram. You're doing both at the same time, which is why I like those dartboards. But yeah, if it fits your macro approach, it requires tracking. You must track it. You cannot eat intuitively if you're going to do that to its full effect.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Which is why, this is it, really. I'll say this, for someone who is really serious and you're like, okay, I absolutely need to do this right now. I need to burn body fat and I need to maintain my muscle mass. This is what we're going to have to do. Tracking is the only surefire way to do it, that we guarantee that it's going to happen, okay? Because hypothetically, what's going to happen? Let's say, hypothetically, someone takes my nutrition advice. Nobody ever actually takes my advice. But hypothetically, what's going to happen, okay? So you track your calories. We figure out what your maintenance calories are. Let's say you're eating 2,300 calories right now. That's what's maintaining your body weight. Then all we need to do is get you into a deficit of somewhere between 300 to 500 calories, okay?
Yep.
We put you in a deficit. You're eating between 1,800 and 2,000 calories every day, and you're keeping pretty high protein. And I can go into more detail with you on what that would look like, okay? Then you do that. You're going to be burning probably 1 pound of body fat per week or close, right? And you say, well, 1 pound a week, what the hell, Sean? I ain't hiring you to do that. Think about it over time, okay? Over time, 1 pound a week, 26 pounds in 6 months, 52 pounds in a year. Whoa.
That's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
And I always ask people, are you interested in permanent results or a quick fix?
Right.
Especially if you're guaranteed to burn out. So is losing 20 pounds in 6 weeks better, or would you rather lose 52 pounds in a year? Sounds a lot better. That sounds a lot better.
I'd like to see you if you lost 52 pounds, honestly.
If I lost 52 pounds,
how much you weigh?
I would be dead. I would be dead. I would be 130. I would be 130 pounds. That's what I weighed when I was in 8th grade.
Okay. Yeah.
And Phil the Shrimp Kid, remember?
That's good.
Remember?
This is why Phil became a fitness coach. He was tired of being a shrimp kid.
It's just all psychological. It's mostly trauma.
It is actually. I'll say that.
We'll do a whole episode on that.
Yep.
Fragile masculinity. So, okay.
I'm the epitome of it.
If we had to pick one, it's the macro approach, especially to start. If you're along your journey further, I'd say you can experiment with things like keto, Mediterranean, low carb, high carb. There's lots of options. but it requires some guidance, strong adherence, and even if you did keto and other things, you'd benefit a ton from tracking what those things are,
Right.
so that you understand the mechanisms behind why it is working. Because then it's not the diet, it's not the red meat or the zero red meat, it's the fact that you stuck with it and you were in those calorie deficits. There was a study done by the American Medical Association, and all their research says basically concludes that adherence, not the diet type, determines fat loss over time, which makes a ton of sense. But it's easiest to track your food. Just use the MyFitnessPal app or the Macros First app. Just start getting some awareness there. You'll start eating better anyway because you're keeping track of it. But I mean, that's it. You gotta stick with the one you can stick to the most. So if you're someone who loves a beer at a football game, don't try a diet that says you can't have any more of that ever again.
Well, I'm going to tell you that. But
Yeah,
Phil's
Sean
going to
will.
tell you you're allowed to.
I'll be a little bit.
Phil's going to be a little bit nicer with you.
Just a little bit, though. I'm talking one or two. Biggest takeaways, you start with small, sustainable changes. Don't try to overhaul it all. You can log what you're having right now without changing any of your diet structure just for that awareness. And sometimes that's great because then you're facing the music, you're getting clarity, and all progress starts with the truth. So log what you're having now,
Let's get
see where you're at on
philosophical.
protein. Are you having 5,000 calories? Are you having 2,000? Are you having 20 grams of protein? Or are you having 120? Like, measure those things, and then you have a place to go from there. I'd actually love to have those numbers before we advise so that we can see what the gap is, so to speak. Lastly, just to share some practical tips for choosing which one, asking yourself questions like, what is your daily schedule? How many times do you have in the day to prep meals or cook? Are you okay tracking your food, or do you have any sort of disordered eating patterns in the past? Do you have specific health conditions? We are not medical doctors. This is through hours and hours, tens of thousands of hours of working with people that coach nutrition. Those are three big questions. And then tips for success, always keeping protein high. You got to incorporate resistance training if you want to see any of this stuff come to work for your health. And I'd say talking about the qualitative piece of food, whether foods are good or bad, it's more complex than that. But tracking will answer all of those in whole. Man, we really didn't talk smack about Blake too much. And there's a specific bullet point on this, but now we don't have time for it. So there'll be a whole episode on that, I think. We'll have him on there too. We'll do it in front of him.
I know. And then we're going to see how
We
fast he
love
can
him.
make comebacks against me. What's probably going to happen is I'm going to talk shit about him, and
Yeah.
then he's going to like start quizzing me on the body. You know, he's going to be like,
Oh, yeah.
all right, Sean, so where does the psoas muscle attach to the femur within 60 to 100 degrees of hip external rotation? I'm going to be like, I don't know any of this. And then like all of a
Yeah.
sudden,
You're just going to punch him in the head.
my-
That's what's going to happen when the show's over.
then all my clients are going to leave me and train with Coach Blake, and I'll be broke.
Yeah, you're like, you don't know where the
But-
psoas attaches? The insertion and origin points? Oh, shoot.
But you got philosophical. I know we gotta wrap this up, but what was it? All progress starts with the truth.
Yeah,
Whoa.
that's a big one. I'd write that one down, get it
Whoa.
tattooed across your forehead. But, these are good talking points. How we eat, there's a lot more going on than just, okay, what is best? You got to think about internally, what does your life look like and what, in fact, works the best way. If you need help on this, that's what we're here for. So go to our website, reach out, and we can set up a free discovery call and talk about where you're at, give you a little roadmap to success right off the bat. So you feel better equipped, you feel knowledgeable, and you feel confident in making some of these changes if you don't feel like you're in a good place. Sean, ending notes here before we wrap things up?
You escaped the wrath, Coach Blake. Escaped the wrath.
No, not next time, though.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you for listening,
Have a
everybody.
good rest of your
Yes.
day.
Beautiful.